Hi, and very welcome to this security webinar. We are honored to once again be able to host a security webinar together with Jamf and Apple. We at Empro have a long history of helping customers with device management, I would say even since the beginning of MDM, which makes me feel really old actually. For us, it's inspiring to see how security can be solved in the best way possible together with smart device platforms and software solutions combined with modern AI. In this session, we will talk about cybersecurity threats, and we will hear about how Apple platform are protected today. We have a fresh out of the oven new iOS and macOS, and I'm eager to hear what Jarkko has to tell us about that. We will talk about how you can sharpen the security on, an example, Apple devices with Jamf Security. Jamf Security also supports other platforms as Windows, Android, and Chrome OS, so stay tuned. We see a lot of misunderstanding around the security today. Some customers state that security solutions is something they might need in the future. But actually the threats are there and are happening now as we speak. I think this quote describes the real world reality in a really good way. You can have whatever security policies in your organization, but we are still by the end dealing with humans. And as end users, we are in most of the cases the weakest link. So here we are, the speakers for today's webinar. I'm Robert, and I will be functioning as the moderator for this webinar. We are also happy to have Jarkko Ahonen, Senior System Engineer at Apple. Jarkko has been and are maybe the go-to guru for many admins in the Apple community. We are also happy to have Benny Root with us from Jamf. Benny is a skilled sales engineer, and we cannot wait to hear what new stuff you have to show us and talk about. And I'm also honored to have my colleague, Emma, who is going to present Empro services and how we can help you and your organizations on these platforms presented today. So the agenda for today, we will start off with Jarkko talking about Apple platform and security, trusting Apple. And then we will hear Benny and then Emma. And then by the end, we will have a Q&A session. And I would like to remember you all there's a chat in the webinar. You can leave questions and we will then answer them by the end in the Q&A session. So just feel free to write questions, comments, so on. So let's jump into the session.
Very exciting indeed. I love the new hardware architecture on the Apple devices and the fact that it's been designed for security. And I say that with great intent because on the subject of feeling old, Robin, I was at an IT event earlier this year and had a conversation with a person who sat beside me, and we talked about how long have we been in the industry. And I said since 1992. And the person beside me said I wasn't even born at that point. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting old and I've done this for a while. But that's a great thing for me because I have a perspective that is sometimes anchored in a different view than many others. And my headline for today's talk is perhaps a little ambitious: the future of identity and security on Apple devices. That's a big one, right? But I think we're truly onto something, and especially the way we work so closely with Apple and adapt their security architecture and also the operating system. So from the hardware all the way through to the operating system. So we layer our software on top of that in a very optimized way, I should say. And the key thing here is our mission is really to simplify work for anyone that is using an Apple device. And for those of you who have used Apple devices for some time, you probably feel that it's like there's a specific reason why that is the case, and that is the user experience is good, and we kind of know what to expect, and it's always working. Without comparing to any other platform, it's a pleasant user experience. And so our strategy based on this mission, it's not to do anything with that user experience. We don't want to compromise it, because once you get into the security space, it's very easy with those tools to compromise the user experience, and the way the manifestation could be a poor user experience in terms of degraded hardware performance. So you keep scanning the system the whole time for malware or threats, and as a result, the CPU time that is available for your applications that you use to do your work, whatever it may be, don't have so much CPU time, and the user experience is compromised. We're also really keen on not presenting information to the end user that is confusing or scary in any way. We think it's important to inform the end user if there is a potential malicious event, but not to scare them, not to intimidate them, and not to feel that someone has taken over my Mac or my iOS device. So that's really, really important for us. And what we do, if we kind of start to get into the weeds a little bit, we manage and secure. And for those of you who know Jamf, you know that we've been doing this for about 20 years. And we come from the management space, and we have invested in the security space because we can see the increase of Apple market share, especially the Mac market share in enterprise, is creating an increased attack surface. So there's more cyber attacks on Mac these days than ever before. 20 years ago, I worked with Apple, and at that time, I was part of the launch team in Sweden who traveled the country to present macOS 10, as it was called then. So the first iteration of really what we have today, a Unix-based operating system. And we said, this is the most secure operating system in the world. And that was probably true, but we should also remember that Apple came from a point where there was very low market share. There was hardly any Macs left in the enterprise. There was a few ad agencies and media companies and schools that were still using Macs. Today, the scenario is very different. In the US, Apple has way over 25% market share in enterprise, which is 1,000 employees and larger companies. We don't see that in the Nordics yet, but I can promise you that Mac will explode in the enterprise across all the verticals and sectors over the next few years. So the attack surface for those that are into malware and malicious software development and hacking attempts, the attack surface will continue to increase in our region as well. Another interesting fact is, I didn't see the numbers for Finland, but in Sweden, we saw more than a tenfold increase of cyber attacks after our NATO application last year. We don't need to talk about where they may have been coming from, but this is something that we need to keep in mind. We have a lot of trends, and we have a lot of forces in the market that is pointing towards a more, much more cybersecurity sensitive environment across devices, Macs, and everything else, really. So that's really important to keep in mind, because what we see also is that we recently sold our endpoint protection software to a municipality in the southeast of Sweden, which is near where I live, as a coincidence. And the neighboring municipality, which they kind of work closely with together from an IT department perspective, had an attack and a breach and a ransomware, and it had also affected Macs in some of the schools in that municipality. And this attack led to them basically, I spun up a trial for Jamf Protect, which is our endpoint security software, and just a few days later they placed the order for the 160 units, I think it was, that they had in the municipality. That was Macs across school and also admin. So it's I think it's important to plan. What I'm trying to say, don't wait for something to happen. Have a look at the risk assessment and look at where you are in the market and your kind of business, and come up with a strategy if you don't have one already, both when it comes to identity management and also protection of those endpoints. So what we have kind of, I wouldn't say we've defined this. We're not an old security player. But if you look at all our investments for the past 3 years, or I would say 90% of our investment in terms of mergers and acquisitions, software development projects that we do organically, internally, has all been in the security space. And we have a concept that we call trusted access. And it's based on zero trust technology. And what we've done, our vision or target for this was really to create an experience that users still can love, but organizations, the employers of those users, can trust that it works and that it is secure. And sometimes this is a compromise. There's a conflict between that lovable user experience and the trust that the organization, the IT, the InfoSec team feel for the solution and those units, those devices. So finding that balance where we still don't compromise on the user experience, but yet secure the data and the device is key. So what trusted access means, and now it's getting a little busy here, we're looking at basically only authorized users using an enrolled device. And when I say enrolled, that means it's managed by an MDM software or solution. The device is secure and compliant. And as you can see here, with these components, we can the security is done by endpoint protection. The compliance is done by the policy and the configuration profiles that we deploy using the MDM tool. And if those 3 lines are green ticks, the user can access the corporate or the organization's data, whether it's sensitive or not, and for whom, that's a whole different discussion. But the point is, unless you have showed that you are who you say you are, and that your device is compliant and secure with everything that means, you cannot access that data or those services. So if we break this down a little bit, so we have the enrollment, and with MDM, we can also do automation. And why is this important? We often get questions around, okay, so Jamf Pro is the best MDM for Apple devices. We kind of know that, but why can't I use what I have already, which is quite often Intune from Microsoft? Well, there's lots of other things you can do, and the integration between these layers and the orchestration workflows you can create, not just from a security point, but also from a management point, is saving loads of time. And there is some great presentations from this year at JNUC. The CIO of Cisco, Fletcher Previn, made a great presentation where he went through the numbers. So actually, sort of how can we motivate the sometimes more expensive hardware cost with Apple? Those borders are not so clearly defined anymore with the Apple silicon. So I would argue it's sometimes cheaper for the equivalent performance, but that's a different discussion. And then the management of those machines and the workflows we can create and the way we can empower the user to feel that they can do some things on the device, typically what we've always been able to do on the Macs, but still the device is compliant. And with the security layer, of course, we can prevent any malicious events, malware being installed and executed, but also hacking attempts that could be structured in a different way that can't be as easily profiled through a binary hash or something like that. And last but not least here, the identify is key, right? And how can we validate that the user is who they say they are? And this is an exciting space. We're doing a lot of innovation here, but Apple is leading this space at the moment with their platform SSO. And today is not that's not the content of today, but keep an eye on this space, because without truly being able to verify who the user is. And how do we do that? What's the process? Well, it's quite simple, right? We have a cloud identity, and we have some kind of multi-factor challenge configured on that cloud identity. Because the password you could lose, right? That's very easily compromised, and I can look at myself. I use passwords that are structured around my family members and their birthdays, and if somebody do social engineering, probably not so difficult to figure out. But I also have another example that is probably quite a bit more scary. It's just a month ago, I had someone logging into my Facebook account. So I got a notification and saying somebody has logged into your Facebook account from a different location. Is that you? The usual stuff that you get, and then you can approve. And I was just a few minutes late, and they'd already changed my password. And why? Because I hadn't configured multi-factor challenge on my Facebook. So there was no connection to me. And a little later, I found out that my password was stored in a cloud database that had a leak. So it was picked up there, and it was someone in Sabah in the Southeast Asia region that logged into my Facebook account. Luckily, I could recover, so no problems. But you see the point here, right? Multi-factor challenge is key until we get some new innovation that also Apple is working on, by the way, in terms of how do we manage identity and how do we verify that the user is truly who they say they are. This whole technology is worth nothing without being able to verify the user. So that's important. Let's just have a look at how the management, so the enrollment, this is what it would look like, for example, with a simple enrollment workflow for automated device enrollment. So the user gets prompted that this device is going to be remotely managed with Jamf, in this case. And we're getting the user configuration, we're getting a bunch of applications. And if the user has an iPhone, for example, they can go into VPN and profiles, and they can log in and authenticate with their work or school account, depending on where the user is. And this is new technology as well. So if you have a bring your own device program in your organization, you can use this type of enrollment workflow. It's called account-based user enrollment. And basically what it does, it separates the organization data from your private personal data on that device. You can basically create two containers, which is very powerful. So that's been existing for about a year or so through, this is Apple technology. It's implemented in our MDM tools. You can configure and manage these. But now the latest release is account-based device enrollment. So what's happening here, because of these increased cybersecurity threats and increased compliance requirements in many organizations, especially I see it now in Swedish state agencies, so not so much in municipalities yet, but basically what they're saying, you're not allowed to use your work phone for personal use anymore. You have to bring another device. And okay, let's think about that for a moment. That's inconvenient for the user, right? But I think also in Scandinavia, we take great pride in sustainability and the sustainability initiatives and the programs that we do on all levels in organizations, but also at home. We recycle like crazy, right? We separate, and we are so mindful of this. Why should we then carry two phones? I can't find a single reason besides, well, it's good for Apple. They sell another phone, but I don't think even Apple would like that with their current programs around sustainability. It's just not the right thing to do. So how do we manage this then? Well, with this new technology, whether the user is owning the device and using it for work, we can enroll and separate. Whether the organization gives the new employee a new iPhone, we can also do the same thing. So we can separate and protect the organization data. We manage that container, and we give the user its own personal container for photos and whatever else may be there. And we can control, of course, through data policy and other tools that we have, what is allowed and not allowed from a service point and social media point, for example. So this is super powerful. And here I'm very interested in having conversations with with you guys around these types of programs, because this is basically, Jamf is the first, I believe, to implement the latest account-based device enrollment capability. So that's just a week or two away from a release point. Let's talk about automation. So what is automation then? What could that entail? Well, it could be updates of the operating system. It could be application updates. It could be notifications to the user that something has happened, so they are aware that now this has happened. But it could also be around conditional access. So suspending conditional access, for example. So if a device is compromised, we can close down. But it could also be all these other things. So there's this whole list of things that we can automate in a very, very powerful way. And this generates, obviously, huge cost savings and time savings, which are super important. Let's look at security a little bit for a moment. So obviously, enforced passcode and device encryption on an iOS device, that happens anyway, but enforced passcode policies, that's what we do through MDM, right? That's a basic example. We can monitor and look at benchmarks from a security point. So this is compliance. We had a customer in Denmark recently who called us and said, hey, we did an audit on all our devices, PCs and Macs, and the Macs were found completely non-compliant and a massive then security exposure potentially for that organization. And from that, they started using Jamf Pro and Jamf Protect. So Jamf Pro to manage and make sure all these policies are enforced to be compliant, and then Jamf Protect to add that extra layer of security from an endpoint perspective. And if we look at the prevent layer, well, obviously the most basic thing that happens here is basically anti-malware, antivirus. So if there is a process that is identified as malicious, so this we match through a database that we update several times a day. So I would dare to say that Jamf is probably in the lead in terms of managing and updating the database of known threats. We also discover sometimes threats for the first time on the Mac platform. So this is an automated process. This message can be customized so the user is feeling not so concerned or still informed. And this happens automatically. And for those of you who have looked at Jamf Protect that is providing this service on a Mac, you may have tried it and then you saw, okay, this happens when you try to execute a process or when a process is trying to execute itself. I want to be able to see this already at the download stage. So that function is now being released in Jamf Protect. So that's something that I'm very happy to share. And it's based on user feedback. I don't want to let this malware sit on my system until it's executed. I want to identify it already when it's been downloaded, because that's typically how it ends up on the device anyway. Another prevention function, iOS, we've received a smishing attack here, and there's a link. And this is the whole conversation in the introduction, both Roban and also Jarkko said it with regards to the user. And the user is sometimes or maybe always the weakest link in any of these. So what we can provide here is a device-wide protection against phishing attack, ransomware attacks, and that type of. And what happens here, as you can see on the notification, it's a bit small on the top of the screen, but a severe threat has been detected. So obviously this is quite a significant attack attempt, right? So even if we blocked it, we know that this user and this device has been targeted for an attack. We get relatively simple information that this has happened, and we can also open up a little bit more descriptive information about what happened here. And since the device was attacked in this manner, we can change the risk profile of that device. And this is what happens here, and that's what sort of builds and puts this whole circle together with trusted access, where we can use all these components, we verify the user, we make sure we have all the policies and all the configurations in place for compliance, we secure it with endpoint protection, but also ongoing. We do an analysis pretty much in real time. What's the status of that device? Did anything happen that makes it more or less secure at any given point? So this is what we call continuous conditional access. And given we don't have so much time today, I'm not going to go in and define that, but think about those words, continuous conditional access. So we evaluate the status of that device on an ongoing basis, and we can shut down conditional access at any time if there is a compromise to that device. Pretty powerful stuff. Identity. This is one that I'm passionate about, and I'm so excited about Apple's platform SSO and where that's going to go. And basically what happens here is that we, instead of creating a local user account on the Mac that doesn't connect with anything, it lives on the Mac. Mac OS is Unix based. It needs user accounts and groups to function. Okay, we know that. We need to work with that. But we can make that user account connected with a cloud identity. And this is where I get a little passionate, because I can't for my life motivate why anyone should have user accounts on Macs today, 2023, soon to be 24, that are not leveraging the cloud identity. What can we do with that? Well, we get the multi-factor challenge for free, right? We get that, so we can really truly verify the user. The other thing we get is we can use the group settings. In this case, it's Microsoft, so it will be what's called now Entra ID. We can see if the group is an admin user or a standard user, and we can set the user account on the Mac accordingly. And this is how it should function. This is natural on the Windows side and have been for so long time. And finally, through Apple's work, through our work, this is happening on the Mac as well. And we can truly create that visibility in systems on the Mac. So Macs are no longer just floating around in organizations doing their own thing that nobody has a clue about. We don't know anything about compliance, security, although it is a secure platform, but we have no visibility of what happens. So this is super, super important. So here we can provision the local account based on the cloud identity, and we sync that on an ongoing basis with the cloud identity password. So that's always happening. And as you remember from the diagram, that was kind of the last point in this. So now with all this, we have the security, we have the identity, we have the management through MDM. We are green and we are ready to access the resources we need at any given time. And this is continuous conditional access, because if there is a threat, a smishing or a phishing attack, we can degrade that device to a lower security level and turn it off from accessing the systems we deem critical. So that kind of brings it all together, and this is a short time for so much information and so much functionality. So I would love to continue this conversation with you guys at another point. And with that, I'd like to thank you so much and hand over to Emma. Thank you.
Thank you, Benny. A lot of interesting stuff there. I'm just going to give you a short introduction on what Multitronic Pro or MPro does. Most of you probably already know who we are. And one of our mantras is that we want simplifying technology, enabling success. So we want the technology that you use as a municipality, school, or a company, that it's easy to use, and that the end user doesn't have to struggle with difficult technicalities. So if I go forward, our expertise and strengths are the fact that we look at the whole device lifecycle. That's the first part. So the device should be one that is functioning for you as an organization. It should both work in the organization, what you already have in use in your organization. It could be a Mac or an Apple, or it could be another type of PC, perhaps a Windows, Microsoft device. We want the device to suit your needs or your employees' needs. And then, of course, we make sure that it's managed in the correct way. And at the end of it, we also like to make sure that it's recycled in the correct way. We build different IT solutions, so we look at the full thing. Devices is not the only thing we look at. Every kind of IT solution is interesting for us. And here comes the third part, in that we are agile and curious. So if you have a problem, we are most likely willing to solve your problem. We like to learn new stuff here at MPro. And our goal is, of course, to simplify your IT administration. And here, if you are an IT department, perhaps you already know IT, but the thing is that you should be able to focus your time and effort on what you do best, and then we can come in and help with what we do best. So we do tailored IT solutions for our customers. We provide the hardware. We do device management, making sure that that's simple and easy for the user, as simple and easy as it can be. Security is now a very big thing, and thanks to what Benny just was talking about, Jamf Protect, which I would like to also point out that it's available for more than Apple platform. It was visible in some of the small text there, that it's also available for Androids and Windows and all of the devices. And then infrastructure, different types of networks, servers, backups, and file management. And one big part is also audio and video installations in different conference rooms or meeting rooms. We have technical support during our business hours, and I'm the team leader of the technical support. We have a phone hotline that you can call in Swedish, Finnish, and English. Unfortunately, no other languages at this point, but at least the three most common. And then we have also a support email. And with me, I have a lot of great people that can help you with different stuff. So I'm just the team leader. Most of the support cases will go to someone else in my team. And there, if you need to contact me, you can also see my QR code for my LinkedIn there. I won't spend that much time on this presentation because we also need to save some time for questions and answers. And there I saw already that Ilpo has put on a question there. I think perhaps that Benny will be. I could answer it, but since we have a Jamf expert in the room, I'll let it over to him.
Yeah, so we're on the Q&A session now. So we have a question from Ilpo here. So how does it work? I mean, do admin has to tell what is phishing site to the Jamf security system, or does it like automate? Is it automated in some way? I think Benny, you're on mute.
Sorry, yes. Sorry. What was the question?
Yeah, the question was about Jamf security and radar portals. So, if how does it work? Is it automated? Does the system know what's phishing or not, or do you need to configure everything manually, or how does it actually work?
Okay, that's a great question. So it's fairly simple, and it's automated in terms of the protection. What needs to be done is the pushing out through MDM. What we call an activation profile, which is really the definition of the protection that we're providing to that device. And it can be quite a lot of different things, but in this case, it's always an activation profile. And that's typically something we would look at you guys, Holban and Emma, to provide that service to your customers, the definition that is, and then the delivery and everything else is automatic. And
I would like to add to that, Benny, because it's not a set database where this phishing request would go. It's AI behind that could also find, for example, 0-day attacks. So Benny, perhaps you would like to tell us a little bit about the Miriam AI.
Yeah, so that's really a machine learning function in the whole Jamf security cloud. So there's two components: the AI component that is always learning and analyzing new attack types and URLs and how it's structured. But it also, the manual component of this side, which I didn't mention before, is a team that we call Jamf Threat Lab. So it's not developers, but it's cybersecurity specialists on the Apple platforms that are day in and day out, they're analyzing what's going on from a cybersecurity point on the Apple platforms. And their knowledge is also used to develop both Miriam and also the profiling of new malicious attacks on Macs, for example.
Yeah, thank you on that. And we can deep dive in this product. So just have to contact them or me. You have the emails by the end of the presentation, or have us a call. You find all our information on multitronicpro.fi. So Ansi also have a question on maybe to Jarkko. So will it be possible to have 2 Apple IDs on a device, personal and company managed?
Well, since we launched macOS Sonoma on Monday, yes, it is possible. So the answer is today.
Yes,
and it
So
is improving as we speak. So it's an evolution, and it will become better. There's actually a good Mac Admins podcast, the latest issue of that, where our director of product marketing for these things is actually talking through the whole topic. So Mac Admins podcast, the latest session, worthwhile.
I know I'm repeating myself now, but
on iOS 2, yes.
iOS 2,
on iOS 2.
I would really encourage everyone to have a look at this, because that is super cool, the ability to separate the devices in that manner. So yeah.
And that this refers to what Benny told us about the account-driven enrollment. So,
And honestly, if you want more detail, I mean, we're happy to take a session with you separately if you want. Just let us know.
Yep. For sure. So I'm eager. I've been thinking about this question all afternoon. So Jarkko, what's the most common question you get about security?
Well, once we go through what I just did, but in more detail and more time, often enough organizations go like, okay, so we don't necessarily need antivirus on that. But the most common question is, how do I get visibility? How do I get an XDR type functionality?
Yeah.
We provide the framework, we don't provide the tools. So we believe in the fact that specialists in that area make better tools than we can ever make for the variance of customers. So XDR and the endpoint security framework is there for XDR vendors like Jamf Protect, for example, to provide that capability.
Nice. Yes. So, do we have anything to add, guys? I know our time is running out. So,
only the fact that this is just a teaser, so don't be strangers. Don't be afraid of us. We don't bite. We promise to have lunch before we meet you. So give us a ring.
Exactly. That's how it is.
So you're more than welcome to contact us.
Yeah. So I suppose that's a wrap up. So thank you everybody for joining this webinar. And keep your eyes open for upcoming webinar. I know we will have something in a month or so. And then also we are pushing a lot on security at the moment. So keep your eyes and ears not closed, so to say. So you will see more of this stuff. Thank you very much, and see you once again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.